traveling documents with her. I stole that from your former mayor, Willie Brown. He used to say that about Oakland. But we permit her to come to Oakland, across the bay. She is the representative on the Board of Supervisors for the 6th District. Her name is Jane Kim. This moment. Bow your heads with me for a moment. Let us pray. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast by Thy might led us into the light, we thank You for this special day. Be with us. Inspire all who are gathered here in Your house. Humble our hearts. Clear our minds and clarify our thoughts. Season our words with Your grace. And give us the courage and the victory to speak until justice waits. And let all the children of God say amen. Once again, we are going to go immediately to our introduction. I've already introduced you to Supervisor Jane Kim. Some of you may have come here to see a star. You have watched and here, you have watched great actors walk the red carpet and dazzle the silver screen of Hollywood and beyond. There is one such star here with us today. He is no stranger to any of us, and he hails from the Bay Area. You already know this, and in the interest of time, if you'll allow me, I'm just going to let anyone speak.
I want to thank Alan Temple here, Pastor J. Alfred Smith Jr. here and Sr., who I remember so well for his work in social justice when there was nobody talking about social justice in this area, in this area. But let me get back to this. I've been on the road, South Carolina, Maryland. I've been on the road in New York. I've been on the road in San Bernardino. I've been on the road, and I tell you what, I feel the burn. integrity, someone who has a real program for change. I'm going to introduce the next President of the United States.
For moderating, Danny Glover for traveling with me all over the country. And as Tosco mentioned, not only is he one of America's great actors, but a lot of people don't know he has devoted his entire life to social, economic, and racial justice. Let me thank Jane Kim for all of the great work she is doing. And thank her. What I have found throughout this campaign is that tens of millions of Americans have reached the conclusion that given the enormous crises that we face as a nation, that for 30 years, the middle class has been shrinking, and shrinking. That today we have 47 million people living in poverty. And let me tell you, I know that in Washington they don't use the word poverty. Media doesn't talk about poverty. But what I have seen from coast to coast, in inner cities, in Baltimore, in Philadelphia, in Detroit, what I have seen in rural communities is I have seen in Native American reservations are levels of poverty that the vast majority of the American people have no idea exist. What I have always believed, at the bottom of my heart, is you don't judge a nation. A nation is not a great nation based on how many millionaires it has or how many nuclear weapons it has. A great nation is great based on how it treats the weakest and most vulnerable amongst us. And I will tell you that in that regard, we are not doing very well. All right? We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any nation on earth, any major nation. We have millions of senior citizens trying to get by on $10,000, $11,000, $12,000 a year. We have huge unemployment rates in inner cities and in rural communities of 30, 40, 50%. So maybe it might be a little bit smart for us as a nation to be investing in jobs and education for those young people rather than jails and incarceration. What this campaign has been about is making it clear that if elected president, we are going to end a corrupt campaign finance system. Now, in Vermont, I've run for office a number of times. Most of the time I've won, sometimes I've lost. Democracy is about one person, one vote. You like my ideas? Vote for me. You don't like my ideas? Vote for somebody else. That's called democracy. But what democracy is not are billionaires buying elections. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world today. but nobody knows it because almost all of the new income and wealth is going to the 1%. America is not supposed to be about the top 1/10 of 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 90%. It's not supposed to be about 20 of the wealthiest people owning more wealth than the bottom 150 million people. It's not supposed to be about mom working 50 hours a week, dad working 50 hours a week, the kids working, and 58% of all new income goes to the 1%. That is not what America is supposed to be about. And in terms of criminal justice, every person in this room and every person in this country should be profoundly humiliated by the fact that we have more people in jail in America than any other country on earth. We have 2.2 million people in jail. We're spending $80 billion a year to lock up fellow Americans. And if elected president, that is going to change. I'm going to be brief and end this because I want to get into the discussion here. But what this campaign is also about is doing what the media does not do. And that is talk about how the United States in many areas does not compare well to other wealthy countries around the world. I hope that everybody in this room, I'm sure you do, understands that the United States is the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a right. I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border, Burlington, Vermont. Everybody in Canada, the children, the seniors, the poor and the rich have health care as a right. You go to the doctor when you need to go to the doctor. And the cost of prescription drugs is a fraction of what it is in the United States because the drug companies are ripping us off unconsciously. And I believe that, again, this is not a radical idea. It exists in Germany, it exists in Scandinavia and other countries. In the year 2016, in a changing technology, a changing economy, when we look at public education, which needs significant improvement, what we also need to know that public education cannot just be first grade through 12th grade. We need to make public colleges and universities. I come from a family that did not have a lot of money. My parents never went to college. And there are millions of kids in the same boat right now all over this country. Think about this. If we make it clear to the children and the parents and the teachers that any boy or girl in this country who studies hard, who takes school seriously, does well in school, that regardless of their incomes, of their families, those kids will be able to get a college education. That is revolutionary. Last point, but not the least point that I want to make now, is I know that Donald Trump has come to California. Are you lucky? And he has, with his profound wisdom, told the people of California that there is no drought. And this is a real shock to the people of California. They thought there was a drought, but Donald knows better. He knows better. There's plenty of water, and he will find than the entire scientific community. So stop with this guy. You didn't know that. He's one of the great meteorologists of our time. You didn't know that. And he has, after years and years of intensive study, reached the conclusion that climate change is a hoax. But needless to say, everybody else in the world understands, other than Donald, that climate change is not a hoax, that it is the great environmental crisis facing our country and the world. And that if we do not take on the fossil fuel industry and tell them that we are going to leave this planet in a way that's healthy and habitable for future generations, and that means that their short-term profits are not as important as the future of this planet. I'm getting told to shut up, and I will do that.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're going to change the tune just a bit, and let's fold in our other communicators today. Seeing that the Supreme Court has taken us in part back to the pre-1965 era, what would each of you do, using the power of your respective offices, to ensure that we don't further inch our way back toward pre-1865? How do each of you see the gutting of Voting Rights Act impacting our democracy in the future? And what will you do to not only protect voting rights in this election, but also enhance access to the ballot? Now, you can close your eyes for a moment and decide if you want a piece of that pie or the entire part. Who would like to speak first? Daniel.
I think, first of all, we realize more than ever in this campaign right now for Bernie Sanders as president, how much voting, how important voting is. It's not to diminish all the other things that have happened in the past, in the future, the past. But we understand that there are millions of people who become excited, enthusiastic about this campaign because of the message. Because of the message. It's not my personality. So it is clear that we have to do everything in our power not to be absent when we talk about the Voting Rights Act. And it's been gutted, as you said. We have to do everything in our power as citizens. We have to encourage and let our legislative officers and others know that it is an important part, the essential part of this democracy. And our voice, every single vote counts. So that's the first thing we do.
Well, in San Francisco, we just introduced a ballot measure that will be on in November that is going to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. Voter turnout is amongst voters between 18 and 30. And 18 is one of the most awkward times to register to vote. Some young people are taking off for college, they're moving out of their house, they're starting a new life, and this is the time that we expect young people to register at a home address and get out to vote. And we know that that doesn't happen. So we should start registering young people at a younger age, at 16 and 17, when many of them are in school and taking civics and U.S. government. How many of us remember civics and U.S. government? It's amazing to vote when you were 16 years old. We're starting that here in San Francisco. But we need to do everything that we can to take out any barriers to voting here in this country, because I believe we represent the majority. I really believe that we represent the majority of this country. And if everyone was able to participate and vote, we would have stronger and more progressive leadership here in our country and our cities and our states.
Let me agree with both Danny and Jane and say this. You know, you stop and you think about all of the blood that has been spilled in this country to make sure that every person, regardless of color, has the right to vote. And then you think of this horrific Supreme Court decision, and literally the day after you got attorney generals and governors working overtime trying to make it harder for people to vote. That is beyond a disgrace. And let me tell you, if elected president, the Attorney General of the United States will be working and taking on every one of those Republican states. Democracy is about, we can have different points of view. That's called democracy. But don't deny people the right to vote because they're people of color, because they're poor, because they're young, because they are old. In my view, we should make voting rights as simple as possible. If you are of the voting age today of 18, you are registered to vote. End of discussion.
Blvd and James Clyburn. Here's a shout out to one of our home girls. This is the home church of Congresswoman Blvd. She and James Clyburn co-authored Bill H.R. 5571 titled 10-20-30 to increase the allocation of funding for in-counties with persistent poverty. Currently, 45 million people live in poverty. 28% are African Americans, and 38% are African American children. Will you support this bill, Senator Saunders? And what would your administration do that has not already been done to address the issue of childhood poverty?
We absolutely support that legislation. I have spent the last many decades of my life fighting against the outrageous level of childhood poverty that we have right now. Look, what we have got to do, and the point that Jane made a moment ago, and I want to reinforce this, everything that we are talking about today is what the majority of the American people believe. We are not the fringe. Donald Trump and his friends are the fringe. Who believes, what sane person in America believes that in the richest country in the world, 22% of our kids should be living in poverty, and for the African American and Latino communities, those numbers are much, much higher. So what has to be done, and by the way, if you follow what goes on in Congress, our Republican colleagues want to make it much worse. They want to cut nutrition programs, cut child care programs, cut education and Pell Grant programs. They want to do exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. And in my view, if we're going to deal with childhood poverty, if we're going to deal with poverty in general, that means fundamentally changing our national priorities. And that means, among many other things, no more wars like the war in Iraq. How does it happen when we have trillions of dollars, trillions, to spend on a war in Iraq and Afghanistan, but apparently we don't have the money to rebuild inner cities in America, create decent schools, decent health care, affordable housing. How could it be that in America in the year 2016, in Flint, Michigan, children are poisoned by the water that they drink? So we need a fundamental change of priorities, and that means that the billionaire class will learn they are not going to get it all, that we are going to focus on low-income inner cities in this country, as well as many rural communities that are hurting as well. We've got to change our national plan.
I'm going to stand as well. When I was a community organizer, I worked with young people in San Francisco, and at the time, I actually never thought I would run for office. But when I was an organizer, I learned that one of the most important things that elected officials do, whether they serve on your school board, your city council, in Congress, is they determine how our dollars are spent and invested back into our community. They determine how much goes into our streets, into our classrooms, for teacher pay, into housing, into prisons, into police. They decide which neighborhoods, which communities, which state. The budget is more than a series of line items and dollar signs. It is a statement of our values and our priorities. And here in this country, we used to not have homelessness as an urban phenomenon. Homelessness did not always exist in cities across this country. It emerged in the 1980s. And it happened to emerge, and it dovetailed exactly with when President Reagan at the time started cutting funding to HUD, to public housing. We used to have more public housing units than people on the wait list in the 60s and 70s. And in fact, if you became homeless, and I talked to social workers during this time, you would often get housed within a week. And when they started cutting funding to HUD, they cut it by 50% over several administrations. Homelessness began to emerge as an urban phenomenon in cities across the country. And now the fastest growing demographic of the homeless count in San Francisco, the city that I represent, in New York City and Los Angeles, is families. It is single mothers with children under 6 years old, and this is a moral travesty for our cities. Senator Sanders, because housing is not a privilege. In the city that I represent, housing is a privilege. Housing is not a privilege, it is a right.
So I want to reemphasize what our new state senator this church, which against all odds, located in this community, and then began to do the work, continue to do the work, from the moment it became the home for the Breakfast for Children for the Black Panther Party. And ever since then, I was at graduation recently at a graduation of young men and women who will be trained in the trades for the new technology around solar energy. Their graduation, they'll do their part, but what they're saying that we need help. And I believe, and I know that we have these two as our representatives, they're going to get the help they need.
We have two short questions for you from the dais, and then we're going to take a couple of questions from the floor. Senator, well, I can't even think of you as senator now. Senator Byrne. Okay. The Affordable Care Act has allowed 20 million Americans to gain health insurance, including many in marginalized populations throughout the U.S. Yet even with these improvements, 28 million Americans still have no health insurance and millions more are underinsured. What would a Bernie Sanders presidency look like? How would you strengthen and improve this legislation? That is a brief answer.
the Affordable Care Act. I voted for the Affordable Care Act. But what we have to acknowledge is the Affordable Care Act is an important step forward, but we have yet a long, long way to go in terms of health care. As you just heard, 28 million, no health insurance, even more underinsured, and every day we're getting ripped off by the greed of the pharmaceutical industry that charges us the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. The brief answer to your question is that the United States should do what every other major country on earth does, guarantee health care to every man, woman, and child as a right. That, in my view, is through a Medicare for all single-payer program.
Another big question. Describe how your economic plan provides for a reinvestment in distressed neighborhoods, and also how do we assist those who have yet to experience the economic recovery in their lives and in their communities. No doubt that you drove through here, you saw the light. You saw the empty lots.
I have seen those empty lots and the abandoned housing and the boarded up storefronts all over this country. Don't think that Oakland is alone. And it is totally unnecessary and unacceptable. We have, first point that we have to make is that when you read the papers once a month, they say that unemployment is 5% nationally. Does anybody really believe that? No! You're right. That's the official unemployment. And there's another government report that talks about real unemployment, including people who have given up looking for work and people who are working part-time when they want to work full-time. And that together, real unemployment is close to 10%, and in many communities around this country, it is much higher than that. So what do we do? What we do is understand that we need a massive federal jobs program to put our people back to work. How do you do it? Well, it's not hard. Number one, as a nation, we should be hiring teachers and child care workers, not firing them. Number two, all of you know that our infrastructure, a fancy word for roads and bridges and water systems and wastewater plants and levees and dams and rails are in massive disrepair all over this country. We rebuild our infrastructure the way I think we should. We create 13 million good-paying jobs. Building the affordable housing that we need makes sense to me for people to work. Building affordable housing, rebuilding wastewater systems. You know, I was just up in the Central Valley. I didn't know this, to be honest with you. You got thousands of people there who turn on their water faucet and they can't drink the water because of pesticides in the water. All right? We have got to invest to make sure that everybody in America has clean drinking water, that we have the state-of-the-art rail system, and when we do that, we improve life in America and we create 13 million jobs. Last point, we should not be giving any more tax breaks to large corporations. We should be working with small and medium-sized businesses, especially if we're going to deal with youth unemployment, African-American businesses, Latino businesses, we're going to put those things forward.
Before you get that, there is an issue of the transport of coal. Other pollutants that are currently being routed through the African-American and the impoverished communities and neighborhoods. How do you weigh in on that?
Well, I weigh on it in two ways. Right now is, I think everybody here knows, in low-income communities, in African-American communities, there is a heck of a lot of pollution going on. I was in the Bronx a number of months ago, and somebody, I can't remember the exact number, I don't want to misspeak here, but the number of children dealing with asthma. You got that here as well? All right. Right here in this community. It was off the charts, unbelievable. And you combine that with lack of good healthcare access, you got some serious problems. So the answer is twofold. I have opposed all of these pipelines, the Keystone Pipeline and the other pipelines, because we have got to transform our energy system away from coal and oil into energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Under President Obama, we have made some progress in moving to sustainable energy. But we have the potential to do much, much more. We can have rooftops all over this country, and in states like California, where you got a lot of sun, they can generate an unbelievable amount of electricity. That's what we should
We all know that education has been said to be the great equalizer. However, with the rising cost of college tuition and rising debt associated with students' loans, what are concrete ways we can address college affordability?
So I talked a little bit about the budget, and so I want to talk about the California state budget for a moment, since this is where we are. The California state budget over the last 30 years has actually roughly stayed proportionally the same. 40% K-12 community college, 30% health and human services, and the final 30% goes to everything else. Now there are two line items that changed significantly over the last 30 years, and you could probably guess the first one. Prisons. That's right. Used to be 3% of our budget, went up 6% over the last 30 years. There's only one other line item that changed that significantly, and that was higher education. Our Cal State and UC system, it went down exactly 6%, from 18 to 12% of our California state budget. So when we talk about the schools to prison pipeline, it is real. When we talk about who we have decided to value, the system that California has decided to invest in that our young people will go into, we built 23 state prisons over the last 30 years. We built only 3 CSUs and 1 UC. We used to cover 80% of your tuition if you went to a UC or CSU 30 years ago. Today that has dropped down to under 30%. So I started here locally in San Francisco. I introduced a proposal to make City College free for all San Francisco residents. We know that community college has long been the institution that has allowed many of our citizens to rise in the middle class. In fact, in San Francisco alone, if you are a City College graduate, on average you earn $11,000 more than your counterparts with only a high school education. And I'm going to do this with a proposal that I introduced 2 weeks ago that will do a slight modest increase on housing and buildings of $5 million and above. It will generate $29 million a year in the county of San Francisco. To make City College free today is $13 million. We are going to make City College free in November. I hope that I'll have your support. If we do this, we will be the first city in the nation to make City College free for all of our residents, regardless of income or age. Wealthiest homes in the city. Thank you.
Secretary, did she say it all? Did she say it all?
She said it all.
We have some volunteers here in the audience who've been identifying a couple of questions for me.
Bernie, end of use!
Bernie. Senator Bernie. It is undeniable who have been in the trenches fighting for civil and human rights for decades. African Americans and Latinos, irrespective of class, irrespective of economic status, education, personal or professional achievement, live in constant fear for the well-being of their children and loved ones. Though they live in America and pay their fair share of taxes, mothers afraid to let their sons grow up, go out, run in the evenings for fear they're running might be misinterpreted. Fearful, setting curfews unrealistic for young adults. How can we change this? And I think we have someone from the floor who wanted to speak to that very issue. Someone who was a member of the Hunger for Justice Frisco 5.
It's been a long time. I've been wanting to meet you forever. I'm just excited just to be in the same room as you, Marie. So I totally feel the burn. I've lost my voice a little bit after the Warriors game. So we're gonna do it tonight too, baby. Mr. Future President of the United States, how did you handle the nationwide militarization of police and address those police killing unarmed minorities? And what is your vision for much needed police-wide police reform? Thank you.
Great question. An enormously important question. This is the what kind of country are we when mothers are afraid to let their kids go out and play? I mean, that's so what do we do? First start, we start off easy, and by saying that, in my view, that any person in America who is killed while being apprehended by the police or dies in complete police custody, that should immediately and automatically initiate a Department of Justice investigation. If the word goes out, it is not going to be just local police departments investigated. It will be an aggressive Department of Justice and an aggressive Attorney General. That's number one. Number two, unlike many other countries, here in law enforcement in America, we do not have the culture which says that lethal force, shooting somebody, is the last response, not the first response. Sometimes we do want police to use lethal force in a tragic situation. Somebody busts in with a machine gun, yeah, you want that person taken out. But too often, Too often the response is lethal force rather than coming up with other ways to deal with the problem. Third point you raised. There are communities in America where the police look like occupying armies. You know, you think you're in Iraq, you're invading the community. The goal is, and there are some police departments in America who do this, the goal is not for a police department to be intimidating the local populace. The goal is to have a police department which is part of the community, which is respected, which is helpful. We want a police department where people feel comfortable going to a police officer and saying, there's a drug deal going on over there. We want the police to be part of the community, not a force that terrifies and frightens the people in the community. Further, what we would like to do, and this is tough, it's not tough stuff, but it's something we gotta focus on, is we want local police departments to reflect the diversity of the communities they serve. Respect the majority of the officers will be African American, or Latino community, same thing. All right, and the other thing, which is related to everything else. I learned this, I didn't know this before I began to run for president. Turns out that over the last 30 years, millions of people have received police records for possession of marijuana. It turns out, according to studies, blacks and whites do marijuana at about equal rates. But you know what? Blacks are 4 times more likely to be arrested than whites for marijuana. Turns out that you have a Federal Controlled Substance Act that lists marijuana as a Schedule I drug, right next to heroin. All right, my view is that we take marijuana out of the federal. Officer stops your car and there's marijuana in there, you got not just the marijuana issue, but other things occur as well. All right? So I think, by the way, if I lived here in California, there's going to be an item on your November ballot to legalize marijuana, I would support that. There has got to be a lot of work done in fighting racism within police departments. I still see this. And I work in a lot of training and stuff. But those are some of the things that I would do as president.
Good afternoon, Senator Sanders, and thank you all for being here today. So in Oakland, in East Oakland. My name is Mia Yoshitani. I'm with the Asian Pacific Environmental Network Action. APEN is an environmental justice organization. We organize low-income Asian, Pacific Islander, immigrant refugee communities. Just like a lot of our environmental justice and social justice, economic justice allies who are here in this room, we organize at the intersection of racism, poverty, and pollution. I have a question, and I want to bring some of the issues together that you've been talking about today. I appreciate your commitment to working families and to addressing poverty and to addressing systemic racism and white supremacy, and I appreciate your commitment to addressing climate change. But how will you ensure that climate change is actually addressed equitably? How will you ensure that the people who have been at the brunt of the economic crisis and the environmental crisis, these are the same communities. How will you ensure that these communities are at the front of the line for the benefits of climate change and how we address both the health concerns and the economic needs of our communities?
I have introduced the most comprehensive climate change legislation in the history of the United States Senate. that addresses the issues that you are raising. There is an understanding that the people in community after community who are bearing the brunt of climate change or toxicity in the water or bad air are very often in low-income and minority communities. They do not build coal-burning plants in the suburbs and in wealthy communities. That does not take place. So I think two things. Number one is, and I have to say this over and over again, people have criticized me for saying this, but I think that climate change is one of the great global crises that we face. Do not get our act together, the destruction that it will cause in terms of drought, you're seeing it here in California already, in terms of floods, extreme weather disturbances, acidification of the ocean, they're destroying our oceans. In terms of rising sea levels, Miami may be, don't buy real estate on Miami Beach. It may not be there if present trends continue. All right? These are the realities that face this country. And it's like, if we were attacked by some foreign power, everybody would stand up and say, oh, we got a war going on, what are we going to do about it? We are being attacked by climate change. And we need to act with the same aggressiveness. So to answer your question, nobody will take a more aggressive and bold action. I have one of the differences between Secretary Clinton and myself, is I'm calling for a tax on carbon. All right? That's what I do. When we raise a substantial sums of money, we do pay attention to the aggrieved communities, and we pay attention to those communities where workers are involved in fossil fuels and are going to lose their jobs. We've got to try to help them as well. So we do that in our legislation.
We have another question. Yes.
Hello, Senator Sanders. I'm Mason Reese of the Mentoring Project. I have overheard teachers talking about their financial problems, and I was wondering what you will do to ensure that my teachers get it.
You're doing great. Don't worry, you're doing great.
Help retain teaching talent in public schools.
Great job. What this campaign is about, maybe most significantly, is not just dealing with this or that issue, or it's education and climate change. It is the mandate that the American people think outside of the box. Think outside of the options that the corporate media gives us, or that Congress talks about. Congress is having great debates. Do we cut food stamps or do you cut education? I don't know, cut it. What do you think? That is not the options that we have to deal with. What this young man is asking us, think about it. It's a good question. Think about how crazy it is. Everybody here knows, no one debates it, that as human beings, education is inherent in who we are. I want you to be studying and thinking and learning until the day you die 100 years from now. But second of all, from an our perspective, we live in a competitive global economy. Okay? Other countries understand they're not going to do well unless they invest in their children and invest in education. How do you compete if you don't do that? The idea that teachers are not respected, the idea that education is not respected in this country, the idea that we do not have the best public educational system in the world is unacceptable to me. I want our brightest, are you interested in education? I would hope that when you graduate college or graduate school, you give thought to becoming a teacher. We need great teachers all over this country. well paid, and we have to respect education. I know I'm going to lose a lot of votes here tonight. I know there's a game 7 here. And I know everybody here, loves the basketball. But you know what? You want my humble opinion? Teachers are more important than basketball.
And so, we got a fire going here, and he doesn't want to put it out. Was there other questions?
Yes, this is our final question, but before that, we will be having a women's roundtable, the campaign, on Thursday at 6 p.m. at the Oak Stop, so we can go on and talk more in depth about women's issues and how Senator Sanders is the best candidate for
Senator Sanders, thank you for coming to the Oakland. I love Oakland. The Bay Area was one of the worst hit regions during the 2008 financial crisis, with the erasure of brown and black wealth in the terms of foreclosure and losing home. I myself, my rent went up $300 a month, and I had to leave the Bay Area because I could not afford my place anymore. So what I want to know from you is, how will you ensure affordable housing for everyone, and how will you help restore black and brown wealth in the form of home ownership?
When I was in the House of Representatives, before I was in the Senate, I was a member of the House Financial Services Committee. I fought vigorously against Republicans, against Alan Greenspan, against Democrats, against President Clinton, who thought it was a brilliant idea to deregulate Wall Street and let these people do their thing. They spent billions of dollars in lobbying and campaign contributions to do that. They did it, and we all know what happened. So let me answer your question in a few ways. Number one, we've got to recognize, not everybody may agree with me, but in my view, the business model of Wall Street is fraud. What they did was not an aberration. It's not that, they're pretty honest guys, they made a mistake, that happens. That is not what they are. Over the last couple of years, just a couple of months ago, Goldman Sachs reached a settlement with the United States government for $5 billion. Basically acknowledging they were selling worthless packages of subprime mortgage loans, which led to the economic collapse. So issue number one, if I'm elected president, that will not happen again, because we're going to break up these huge financial. Number two, if what is the case, these financial institutions caused this economic collapse, which resulted, by the way, in millions of people losing their jobs, losing their homes, and in some cases losing their life savings. These people on Wall Street have got to be held accountable. And that means significantly more money than is currently being worked on has got to go into those communities and those individuals who are hurt by the illegal behavior of Wall Street. Third point, as we discussed earlier, we have a terrible crisis. And I know it's particularly acute here in California, but it's true all over this country, in low-income, affordable housing. Now, if you check the record, in my city of Burlington, we started the first municipally funded community, community housing trust fund, which is how it actually spread all over the country. But second of all, working with Blvd, a local representative, many years ago, we passed a low-income housing bill which has just finally begun to be funded by the Obama administration to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. I think what we have heard tonight is that there once was a time in America, Jay made that point, where low-income people actually had access to affordable housing. By and large, that is not the case. We are seeing people paying 40, 50, 60% of limited incomes on housing. That is totally absurd. So, we're going to put people to work building affordable housing. That's right.
We're going to wrap it up in just a few minutes, but before, I'm sorry?
Immigration.
Immigration. We're on your clock.
Well, here's
With the high issue of unemployment being prevalent in communities of color, in addition to conservative rhetoric and immigration being a leading cause of this, how do you reconcile that charge that it's all due to immigration? And how do you plan to address rising tensions and race relations among communities of color?
okay. For a start, we have 11 million undocumented people in this country today. And today, and this is part of the race to the bottom, because I met with some of these workers are being cheated and exploited as we speak right now. And the reason is, if you are undocumented, and I was just up in the Delano area yesterday, literally, if you're undocumented, what rights do you have? So I say I'm going to pay you X dollars an hour, and I know, what are you going to do about it? You're going to go to the cops? You're going to go to the Department of Labor? They're not going to do that. So the employer is in the driver's seat and can do anything he wants to those undocumented workers. And then when you get people forced to work for very low wages, you come in and get a job. Why am I going to hire you at a decent wage when I can pay undocumented people slave wages? So in my view, for that and for many other reasons, we need to move toward comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. Let me just conclude on this. This is, my view, something to think about. Is if you think about history in America, and some of us are old enough to remember what was going on in this country 50 years ago, how do right-wing politicians succeed? You know how they succeed? It's the same old story, not just in this country, it's all over the world. You scapegoat people. You say, you got a problem? I know what the problem is. It's her. She's Asian. You got a problem? I know what the problem is. It's black. You got a problem? I know what the problem is. Bernie Sanders, he's Jewish. You scapegoat people and you blame people for all of the damn problems that exist in society. We have seen, I'll tell you the story. Back in the 1950s, think about this, way back when, the lowest paid white workers in America were in Mississippi. They were the lowest paid white workers in America. They didn't earn anything. Now, you know how their employers got away with paying them starvation wages? They said, hey, you can drink from that water fountain. But the black guy can't. Aren't you a lucky guy? That's what you do. You divide people up. And that is exactly what the Trumps of the world are all about. Right? We understand that if they divide us up, we go nowhere in a hurry. If we stand together as black and white and Latino and Asian American and Native American, as gay and straight, male and women, female, if we stand together and we have the guts to take on the big money interests, there is nothing we cannot do.
singers have left you again a reminder, which is highly appropriate in this hallowed ground, in this sacred space. Some time ago you gave a speech and you were visited by a little bird. We were all waiting in line to be cleared of security. One gentleman by the name of Rafael Jesus Gonzalez presented to us a request that we present this to you. Presented to Bernie Sanders the Earth, Justice, Peace, Healers Badge in recognition of his commitment to the earth, to justice, to peace, and to democracy, presented on May 30th, 2016. It is a badge with a dove. And while it is referred to as a finch, it said, it is no little thing when speaking before thousands to be visited by a finch upon the podium. The trust of a creature so small, easily startled by the slightest gesture, must surely count for something big. That when people tell you he's too old, when people tell you he's a socialist, when people tell you he's dividing the party, it's a lie. They're trying to scare you. Stay courageous, stay determined, and do what you need to do. Follow your heart. May certainly remain prayerful. We send you away asking for God's mercy, that you be safe, that you be healthy, they should be strong, and they should be protected from all unkind and uncaring forces that will try to come up against each and every one of you, especially our elected officials, particularly. Again,